together. In the last two videos, we learned how to create our first pivot table and pivot chart, and then how to use the pivot tables to analyze our data and learn more about our business. In this video, we're finally going to bring it all together and create this nice looking dashboard. And as you can see, Andy is very excited about it. All right, so this is the workbook we used in the last two videos to create our pivot tables and charts. And in the previous videos, this table only contained data for December, and now we have all the data for 2014. So as I scroll down here, you'll see there's a lot more data, and we basically have orders for every month out of the year. I've already created a few pivot tables and charts in this workbook, and then we're going to add some more pivot tables and charts and ultimately create our dashboard. You'll also notice in these pivot tables that I've added a field up here in the filters area. So you can see that up here. I've added region in the filters area. You can also see that over here in the field list. There's region in the filters area. And the filters area allows you to filter the entire pivot table for whatever item you select in this filter here. So if we wanted to see all the sales for the East region, now this pivot table is now filtered for the East region. So this is only showing us sales for the East region, and these two particular salespeople are in the East region. So it shows us all that and filters the entire pivot table for whatever you have filtered up here in the filters area. And this is basically how slicers work as well. So I'll explain more about that when we add slicers to our dashboard. So I now want to create that sales trend chart. So I'm going to go to my sales by region chart here, or tab, and make a duplicate copy. Just hold down the control key when you drag it over. And instead of region here in the rows area, I want to add order date. So I'm going to take order date and drop it in the rows area. And you'll see that's added basically a row for every date we have in our order date column in our data tab, and then summed up the revenue for each date. But we actually want to see this by month and year, because having all the dates in here is way too cluttered for a chart, and it doesn't really make much sense. So we can group this order date by month and year. So to do that, I'm just going to select a cell inside the row area here. Go to the Analyze or Options tab on the ribbon and click the Group Field button. That'll bring up this window, this grouping window, and it basically allows us to group by different date types. So we want to group by months, and we also want to group by years. So I'm going to click the years and click OK. So now you can see we have a chart that's much easier to read because we've grouped our dates by months and years. So now this is showing us the total revenue for the month of January and the year 2014. That grouping has also added a field to our rows area. It automatically adds in a new field called years here, and then the order date represents the months. Now this field is not added to our data source. It's just only added to the pivot table here. The other thing with grouping dates, the one thing you want to know is that if your date, so I'm going to go back to the data table here, and this is the field we just grouped within the pivot table, the order date field. If this field contains any blanks in the source data, or if it contains any numbers that are formatted as text or not a date, the grouping will not work. That button over on the pivot table in the Analyze tab, this button here will be grayed out and it won't work. So that's one thing to note. All of your dates in your date field have to have a date that's formatted as a date in the field. Okay, so now we'd obviously want to retitle this chart, and if we wanted to make it a line chart instead of a column chart, we could just select the chart, go to the Design tab on the ribbon, and choose this Change Chart Type button. But I won't go through all that right now. The other chart I want to show you how to create is a distribution chart. So I'm going to go back to my sales by region. Again, I'm going to make a duplicate copy of this sheet. And the first thing I'm going to do is clear out some of the fields here. So I'm going to clear out the rows and values area. We don't need filters as well. So we'll just kind of start blank here. And I'm going to find the revenue field in the list here, and I'm going to drag it into the rows area. So now that's going to basically list all of our revenue amounts for each order. This would be the total revenue amount for each order in our data set here, which doesn't tell us a whole lot. So what I want to do is group this field. So I'm just going to click on any cell here and go to the Analyze tab or the Options tab and hit Group Field. You can also do this from the right-click menu, by the way. You can just right click and select group, and that'll bring up this window. And now we want to group by amount. So this is showing us our minimum amount and our maximum amount, and then we want to group by 1,000. So we'll just leave it at those default settings and click OK. And basically now it's grouped our revenue by amount. So it's put it in different buckets here by increments of 1,000. So the next thing I want to do is take the revenue field again and drag it into the values area. And that's created a count of revenue for each of these buckets. So basically what this is telling us is that we had 218 orders with an invoice amount or revenue amount of $0 to $1,000. 85 orders with an amount of $1,000 to $2,000. And we can see that over here in the chart as well. So this is extremely useful information. And I love these distribution charts because it quickly shows us, by just glancing at this chart, we can see that this company has the majority of their orders are under $2,000. Their invoice amounts are under $2,000. And then they have some larger invoices out here, but only a few of those. So if this company was looking to grow their total revenue, one way to do that would be to increase your invoice amount. So if they had more invoice amounts in the $2,000 to $4,000 range, then obviously their total revenue would go up. The other way to do that would be to increase their volume. If you got too many buckets out here and there's just a lot of data on the chart, you can limit this. So again, click any cell in the row area, go to Analyze, Group Field, and you could change the ending amount. If I change this to 4,000, that'll limit the number of groups down to, the maximum will be 4,000. And now anything with the invoice amount over 4,000 will just end up in this bucket here. The other way you could do that is to change the increment amount to a larger amount to like 2,000, and then that would decrease the number of groups. Okay, so I now want to create the dashboard tab. So I'm just going to insert a new sheet. You can click the new sheet button or Shift F11 on the keyboard, and we'll rename this dashboard. And I'm just going to select all the cells on the sheet here and fill them with a gray color so our charts stand out on the dashboard a little bit. And now I'm going to go to each sheet and basically copy in the dashboard. So you can select the chart, right click and copy, or you can use Control C and Control V and then go over to the dashboard and paste it in here. Alright, so I just copied in all of my charts into the dashboard sheet here. And I'm going to show you a few little formatting tricks, and then we'll add the slicers. First thing I'm going to do is hold down the Control key and just scroll down with the mouse to zoom out a little bit so we can see them all. And you'll notice that all these charts are different sizes, so I want to make them all the same size. I like the size of this chart here, so if I go up to the Format tab on the ribbon, and I can see the size here is 2 by 3.5. Let's make that 3.5. So we have 2 by 3.5. So I want to make all the other charts the same size. So I'm just going to select this one, hold down the Control key. That'll allow me to select multiples. Then I'll go to the Format tab, and we'll make this 2 by 3.5. Like that. So now all of my charts are the same size. There's also some alignment options. So if I just click or left click and Control left click to select both of those, Format tab, Align, and then now I can choose from all these alignment options here. So I could align left, and that'll line those both up to the left. So you can spend a little time kind of getting them all aligned nicely and make it look nice. The other issue you might come across is if you put any text here and let's say you make one of these columns wider, that changes the size of the chart there. To prevent that, I'm going to, again, left click this chart, then hold down the Control key to select all of my charts. And now if I go up to the Format tab, there's this little button here to the bottom right of the size group. I'm going to click that. That'll bring up my Format Shape dialog, and in the property section, if you're looking for the property section, select this option that says don't move or size with cells. And so basically that allows the chart to remain the same size, and when you resize the cells, the chart's sizes do not change. Alright, so let's add our slicers. So I'm going to select this first sales trend chart here, and I'm going to go to the Insert tab on the ribbon and choose Slicer. And that's going to bring up a list of all the fields basically in our pivot table, and we want to slice by salesperson and region. So I'm going to select those two fields and click OK. and that'll add these slicers into our sheet here. And so basically those are connected to this sales trend chart, and if we click any of the options here, that'll slice the sales trend chart. You'll also notice when you if you select on the border of the slicer, you'll get this options tab up here on the ribbon, and this will allow you to change the properties of the slicer, like the different colors. The other one you'll use often is the columns. If you change the columns here, that'll allow you to change basically the layout of the slicer if you want. We're going to leave this at one column. So this slicer is currently only slicing or filtering this chart up here. We need to connect it to our other charts and pivot tables. So I'm going to right click on the slicer and go to Report Connections. It's going to bring up a list of all of our pivot tables in the workbook, and I'm just going to select all of these so the slicer is connected to all of our pivot tables and charts, and click OK. And now you'll see when we make a selection that all of the charts on the page are being filtered, and you can select multiple by just holding down the mouse and then drag down select multiple. So we also need to connect the region to all of our charts. So I'm going to do the same thing, go to Report Connections, just select all of these pivot tables and click OK, and now the region will be connected to all of our charts as well, so we can slice for the different regions. And even though these slicers are on our dashboard sheet, they also actually filter all the other pivot tables in the workbook. So if I go over to my sales by rep sheet, you'll see that it's being filtered for the North region for the sales rep Michael. And again, if I go back to the dashboard, that's exactly what my slicers are applying, is this filter for Michael and the North region. So that's why I like to have any field that I have in a slicer, I like to have in one of my areas of the pivot table, especially the filters, because now you can see by just looking at this specific pivot table on this sheet that it's being filtered by the North region. If this was not in our filters area, you wouldn't be able to see that by just looking at the pivot table, and it might get a little confusing. So we've basically been able to put together a dashboard here with pivot tables and pivot charts, and then just adding these slicers to make it interactive. Of course, you'll want to add a title up here and maybe your company logo as well, and then line up all the charts and make sure all the titles are correct and everything, and also line up the slicers. But all in all, we were able to take this sheet of data, this giant sheet of data, and turn it into a nice looking interactive dashboard with just a few pivot tables and pivot charts. Alright, so I now want to show a few new features of PivotPal based on some of your requests and feedback. The first one is a layouts tool. So typically when you create a pivot table, it's in this layout here with the subtotals up at the top and in a compact form. And you can see that by going to the Design tab on the ribbon, and you can choose some of these different settings for subtotals, grand totals, report layout. You can also go to the Analyze tab and into the Options menu, and there's a ton of options here that you can choose and select to make your pivot table look and behave a certain way. But these options are time-consuming to actually apply, and they take a lot of steps to do that. So PivotPal has this new feature called Pivot Layouts, and this window here will basically allow you to save some of your custom layouts and then quickly apply them to your pivot table. So here I've already saved a few layouts that I like. For example, this one shows more of a report style with the totals at the bottom down here. It also adds blank rows between each pivot item and a lot of other settings that it automatically applies. This one, for example, Outline with repeating labels, is one that I created that will just show the pivot table in outline form and repeat all the labels. So this might be good for some kind of lookup if you're trying to look up data in the pivot table with all these repeating labels over here. So with the My Pivot layouts, you can basically do anything you want. Any of these different options for the pivot table you can change and customize, and then you can save the layout, save a new layout, and do all these things with these layouts, so you can create your own custom ones and apply them very quickly. The other exciting news is that PivotPal now works with Power Pivot pivot tables. So if your data models contain hundreds of fields, PivotPal will make it very easy to search through those fields, find the field you're looking for in different tables. You can see I have different tables listed here in my search results, and then add that field to your pivot table. So for example, if I wanted to add the month field across the top in my columns here, I could just search month. I'll find it in my dates table here, and then just add it to the columns area, and that'll add it to this Power Pivot pivot table here. So I hope these videos have helped you learn how powerful and easy pivot tables are to use. As you can see, Andy's boss is very excited about his results, and I'm sure your boss will be as well.